Howard, how do your client typically get started with you to brand their business on a step-by-step basis?
Okay, so the way that clients typically go through what I go through as a process is the first is I look at an assessment. What have you done thus so far with your brand, or what have you done correctly and what have you done incorrectly? So it's kind of like a doctor. You got to first get examined to see where you can make the improvements. Okay, so the first thing is doing an assessment. The second thing is then looking at a strategy. A strategy is like a plan. If you don't have a plan, you don't have a map to where you want to head for success. So when you have a strong strategy, you can think of it this way. It's going to give you a plan, it's going to give you a map, and then that map's going to guide you to your treasures. Well, so you have to look at it, well, what kind of strategy do we want to create so you could actually create a strong brand? And these components in the strategy usually consist of what's your vision? A vision would be something you want to go beyond just profits, but really where you make a difference for others and other people's lives. A vision is where you could actually build something much larger than just a single company. Like Apple, Steve Jobs, for example, was very clear on his vision about actually having an integrated computer system. You know, he's the one that created, of course, the laptop, but he created the integrated system between the software, the hardware, and the operating system. By the way, that's what the I stands for iPad, iPod. The lowercase I stands for integration. Most people aren't aware of that. So that's how he started to differentiate. He started to see how he can make or meet unmet needs. So strategy starts to look at who you are in a space, define who you are, and what difference you want to make. The second component, in addition to strategy, is now looking at implementation. How are you going to implement? Most companies, they start off creating a name and a logo before they think of their strategy. If you're not clear of who your target audience is, most of the time your name of your company is not appropriate. 90% of the time, most companies' names are inappropriate. The same goes with their logo. The logo is something that they put together, maybe through their brother-in-law or someone they know, but it has nothing to do that represents the value of your company. So here again, these are the important reasons why you want to start out with a strong strategies to figure out your positioning and figure out those unmet needs that people want from you. So here again, the second part is implementation, execution. In the area of execution and implementation, what you look at is you look at from the standpoint of what's going to be the way that you actually create things that actually make a difference from the standpoint of your logo, your website, your brochure. In other words, when you build out your identity, there's a system in building this out. The first is to figure out what name is that name appropriate for what you're creating. Is the logo appropriate to reach who you want to reach? Is the logo actually reproducible for all medias? In other words, does it work in black and white? Can it work as an app? Can it work to the size of a billboard? Most logos, they don't. They have a very limited usage. Then you have to redo it. The second thing is, like, when you're looking at building out your identity, is ownership of color. Companies like Kodak, they own yellow. Fuji owns green. Pepsi, they own blue. Coca-Cola owns red. It has to do with the psychology and putting in that memory bank in the consumer's mind, a triggering. So when they see the red of Coca-Cola, it automatically triggers in the consumer Coca-Cola. It also triggers a whole thought pattern of what they stand for. They stand for, oh, that refreshing drink. They stand for freedom. They stand for being a first cola. So there's a lot of triggers that are built into the identity system if it's done correctly. Another element to building out the brand identity system is actually the actual typography you use. Font plays a gigantic role. Like with Apple, for example, they use Garamond 90%, and Apple has a very distinct look and feel to their font. You could find this consistently being used through all their advertising, all their brochure, on the website. And even the identity of Apple itself when it comes to their product. They base it on a philosophy, which is keeping a minimalist design, keeping it simple. This all has to do with what kind of experience you want to give to the end user, which is give a very friendly user experience to the end user and keeping things where they're very aesthetically pleasing as well. So function equals aesthetics. So everything that Apple does is building out the identity to based on their position, based on their philosophy, which has been defined in a strategy session. The other elements to building out a strong identity is the right campaigning. Most companies, when it comes to sequencing, don't understand there's an actual sequence of building out the identity. You have to have a place of destination. A lot of times a place of destination would be, for example, a website. Another one might be your bricks and mortar, let's say your retail space. Your social media is used to actually blanket towards people that may you want to develop a rapport to, a relationship. Marketing is based on you're very targeted towards a specific group. Advertising is used to, I hope someone will look at this. So each media is used as a device to get people to a specific destination. And if you're not clear on that destination, you are going to waste a lot of money and time. So that's just all. Those are some of the elements to building out a strong identity. The third component is now managing the growth. So let's say that you build out a widget. You bring it out to market, you got the packaging that fits, you got it on a market shelf. Well, what's next is what's called line extension. You want to build out a line extension, so let's say you have one particular color. Maybe you offer different colors for the line extension. Maybe you offer 3 different price points, a mid, a low, medium, and high. These are all what are called extensions, and this comes into managing a brand for growth. It's also called what's called a brand style guide, is what's called the do's and don'ts to your brand. Don't use these colors. Use these colors this way. Use these fonts this way. This is our value proposition. This is our brand promise. These are all ways to actually keep control of your brand, because when it comes to the brand equity and value, that's what's going to give rise to your company. It's going to be much more than a balance sheet. For example, Coca-Cola is worth $50 billion on a balance sheet if you took all of its assets. If you look at its brand assets now, the things that are intangible but can be felt, like Coca-Cola, the name itself is tangible, but yet it resides in the consumer's heart. That's intangible. It's worth $140 billion of its intangible assets based on its brand recognition. So those are the 3 major things. First, assessment. The second one is to come up with a strong strategy to position your company uniquely. The third is execution, implementation, which is building out your identity. And then the fourth is actually looking at managing your brand for continuous growth.